Hey, it's me, MLB. Here is Torn Down the Middle, Chapter 42, and this one is titled Testosterone. Only a few minutes later, you heard a noise in the hallway. You jumped violently, your head whipping around, eyes searching the hospital room that you were in. Swear I just heard a loud explosion noise? You sat up. Nurses raced past your door, and one dove over the nurses' station bench and grabbed for the phone. "We need the aggressive response team in fast track ASAP!" she hollered into the receiver, before slamming the phone back down on the panel and jumping off the bench as she tore off down the hall. What is going on? "Fight me, half and half!" Ugh, that's what's going on. You groaned internally as you heard the commotion getting more and more out of hand. Ugh, I'm gonna have to get out there and sort them out myself, you grumbled, trying to lift your leg brace off the bed, but failing and ending up just letting it fall heavily on the floor instead with a thud. "Ah!" you hissed, pain shooting down your leg again, making you even angrier. You pulled yourself up to standing and painfully and gingerly hobble-limped to the door, poking your head out into the corridor. As your eyes focused, you saw Shoto standing there in a fight stance, his right arm raised up in front of him with a serious, concentrated look on his face as he stared down Bakugou, who was stalking him in a semicircle, his left arm clutching the gun behind him, while small explosions crackled in the palm of his upturned right hand. "Get the hell out of this hospital," Bakugou snarled. "I'm not here for you. I'm here to see Yin," Shoto replied coolly, his keen eyes not leaving Bakugou for a second. A plastic bag that looked like it contained food clutched in his left hand. Bakugou stopped moving and threw his right arm out, propelling an explosion at Shoto, who dodged it and placed his right arm down on the ground, casting a sheet of ice at Bakugou's leg, but the fiery blonde jumped at the last minute and Shoto missed. There was another scream from the terrified nurses and patients who were watching from nearby in their rooms, and you scowled. "They're going to ruin the place," you thought as you hobbled out into the hall. Bakugou was just about to throw another explosion when he saw you coming up behind Shoto. "Stay out of this, Yin!" he barked as he prepared for another launch attack at Shoto. "Stop it! The two of you!" you yelled as you came up behind Shoto and hobbled around him. You got yourself between the two boys, and Bakugou walked closer as you turned side on to both of them. Without warning, you slammed your palms into each of their chests, simultaneously sending them both to their knees with your weight Quirk. Shoto had dropped to one knee with his head bowed, and Bakugou collapsed onto both hands and knees, the back of his gown falling open. "I don't want to hear one more word about you two fighting. You're supposed to be heroes in training," you scolded heavily. "I'm sick of this. Man up and grow a pair of tits." You released your Quirk by bending awkwardly and touching their shoulders. "Tits?" Bakugou huffed as he gasped for air once your Quirk had been lifted. "Man up and grow tits?" "They're stronger than balls. Fight me, you squashed lemon," you snapped. "I must agree, and it's not possible to grow tits naturally for a male," Shoto panted in confusion. "Good. Both agree on something then," you said sharply as you turned and hobbled back to your room. The aggressive response team had turned up just as you intercepted the fight and had stood back to see if you had handled the situation successfully, deciding not to jump in because everything seemed to have resolved on its own. How the hell are we supposed to report that incident?" one team member asked the in-charge. Girl in leg brace gave both boys hefty chest compressions, told them to grow tits, called one a lemon, and the problem resolved itself, the in-charge replied nonchalantly, like it was the most normal thing in the world. That afternoon you were discharged from the hospital and transferred to the UA nurse's office to see Recovery Girl, who worked her kiss magic on your leg and healed it straight away. Bakugou was being held back for an extra day in the hospital because he kept pulling his IV lines out and he hadn't finished his course of antibiotics yet. It was nice to have him and Shoto separated again. There had been so much testosterone flying around the hospital. Things were starting to get out of hand with your boys. Something was going to have to be done. Your grandma had been staying at your house for close to a month now, and she was getting more and more frail. She couldn't eat solids any longer and was being fed through a tube that went straight to her stomach. She didn't have much time left. The next week went slowly as you got back into the routine of life. Bakugou was back at school again and his wounds had healed nicely, thanks to a bit of extra help from Recovery Girl once he had finished his antibiotics. Shoto was being as sweet as ever and paid you a lot of attention, occasionally throwing in a serious heart-pounding line whenever he got the chance to be alone with you. "Okay, class, school open festival is coming up," Aizawa announced one day, sounding just as done with life as ever. "Class rep, you take over." Ida took to the stand in front of the classroom and took charge, while Aizawa flopped into his favourite yellow sleeping bag and passed out on the floor like a drunk caterpillar. "Please call out appropriate suggestions in an orderly fashion," Ida announced as he turned to the board to write the suggestions that were being thrown at him. He immediately dismissed naked mud wrestling and setting people off on giant rockets, which was a joint suggestion by Sero and Kaminari, backed by Bakugou, then narrowed down the other suggestions to the two most popular, which were a maid cafe and a stage play, Romeo and Juliet. Everyone was then asked to write down which one they preferred on a piece of paper and asked to come up to the front and place their folded paper in a box. Ida waited for everybody to comply, then started pulling the papers out one by one and tallying the votes. "And the winner is stage play Romeo and Juliet," he announced proudly. And there is the end of chapter 42. Stay tuned for chapter 43 to find out who's going to be Romeo and who's going to be Juliet.